Welcome to the Oroville City Council meeting of December 15th, 2020, 4:30 p.m. Calling this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, may I have the roll?
Councilmember Pittman.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Draper.
Here.
Councilmember Hatley. Councilmember Goodson.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Thompson. Mayor Reynolds.
Here. Stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Salute. Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the
nation under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Looking for a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
I move the second.
Councilmember Goodson.
Yes.
Councilmember Draper.
Yes.
Motion carries with 7 yeses and 0 nos.
Moving on to presentations and proclamations. Butte County Elections Office presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. We have with us tonight Candace Grubbs, who is our county clerk recorder. She has brought along some of her staff to speak with us and give us some information regarding the balloting system and the recent election that we had. I know there was some concern about softwares and things like that, so we reached out to the experts so they could tell us, what the real facts are that are behind this, as opposed to the rumors that may be circulating.
Good evening.
Microphone needs.
It's on.
It's on.
Is it on?
Yes.
It's on.
Okay.
Sorry.
Can I take this down?
Yes.
Thank you. I brought with me Keaton Denley, who is our manager of the election side, and to kind of give an overview of all of this. And then please, afterwards, you're free to ask me questions on anything you would like. I know, and I've watched the same stuff you have on television, and I don't know what they're doing in the other states, but we'd like to tell you what we do here and why we're sure that what we do is accurate. Okay? Keaton?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. Good evening. My name is Keaton Denley. I'm the manager for Butte County Elections. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of come down and really set the record straight, because the national media gets a quarter of a story and then they run with it because it sells copies and it makes a good headline. But I want to let you know how the elections are done in Butte County, and to some extent how they're handled in California compared to some of the things that you may be seeing in other states. Again, like Candace said, we can't really comment on what they're doing because I'm not familiar with their election laws in Georgia or anywhere else. The PowerPoint is in front of you. It looks like we can't get that up on the screens, but you have printouts of it. The first, or I guess the second slide here, is just sort of the election milestones, sort of what happened on a day-by-day basis through the month of October and then into November, because it's really not election day anymore. It's sort of an election month. It's sort of ongoing, starting with the ballots being sent out on October 2nd. This time around, we were lucky enough to get our ballots into the mail stream a couple days earlier than we would normally do that. Normally, it would be October 5th. We got them in there just ahead of, I think it was the day before, Los Angeles got theirs in the mail stream. The effect of that means that our ballots were delivered almost immediately. We had voters receiving them the next day from the day that we actually put them in the mail, which was really great for us to get the voters the information, not only their vote-by-mail ballots, but also their voter information guides right away. On October 5th, that was the first day that the ballot drop boxes were available. So many voters were receiving their ballots Saturday and into that Monday. And on that Monday was when the ballot drop boxes were available for voters who didn't want to mail it back to us, and they just wanted to drop it off in one of those boxes. On that same day, October 5th, is when we conducted the logic and accuracy testing for our Dominion voting system. I'll get more into that a little bit later. October 19th, the deadline to register to vote. That is the last day to register for the election. Anybody failing to register by that deadline and still wishes to vote in the election would then have to register and vote conditionally in person, either at a voter assistance center or at our office in Oroville. Those voter assistance centers opened on October 31st, Halloween on a Saturday. They were open for 4 days, starting that Saturday up and through Election Day, 8 hours a day those first 3 days, and then on Election Day for the full 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., sort of like the traditional polling place model. On November 5th, we conducted our 1% manual tally. That is something that's done every election. We count 1% of the ballots by hand to check them against the digital readouts we get from the tabulation systems. That way we are able to verify that the results are accurate. It's not just blind trust in the system. We actually will count 1% of the ballots by hand. And that process actually took us 2 days because we did have 100 and some November 20th, as long as they had that postmark on November 3rd or sooner. And then on November 30th was when we actually certified our election results and submitted them to the Secretary of State. Moving on to the next slide, the Voters' Choice Act. This is sort of just serving as a reminder that the vote-by-mail model we used in November really had nothing to do with COVID. We were already doing this in Butte County. It was our second consecutive election conducted under the Voters' Choice Act, having made the decision to go to that model in the summer of 2019. There were some effects on our office and the public due to COVID-19. One of the things that we wanted to make sure that we maximized was a contactless way for voters to drop off their ballots if they wanted to do so in person but didn't want to expose themselves to any sort of virus or anything like that. And then maybe they didn't want to put it in the mail, so what was the option for them? Well, we expanded our ballot drop boxes to make that happen for those voters to be able to drop. This was the highest rate of turnout we've ever had and the highest raw number of votes that we've ever had in a Butte County election. Prior to this, we hadn't crossed the six-figure number before, and as we'll get to in a moment, our numbers are actually over 104,000 votes cast in the election, which is just a huge number. 82.8%, almost 82.9%, beats the previous record by about 2%, which is just astronomical numbers for a Butte County election. 99,510 voters voted on a vote-by-mail ballot. 52,000 were dropped into the ballot drop boxes. We had 71 of our voters use the remote accessible vote-by-mail system. That system was designed for voters with disabilities who may not be able to leave their home or have a screen reader or some other sort of accessible device they use in their homes. Because of COVID, that was actually opened up to anybody who wanted to use it, not just voters with disabilities. We did have 71 voters take advantage of that system. And then we had 365 military or overseas civilian voters vote in the election. Moving on to voting by mail, we had 39,445 ballots returned to us or sent into us through USPS. And really, USPS, they got some bad press, but they really did an amazing job with this election. Their delivery times were faster than we even saw in March. They were doing a great job, not only with the high volume, but dealing with the fire-affected addresses in Butte County, and then keeping us updated every step along the way. They had weekly phone calls and meetings with state election officials, and they were in contact with our office, letting us know what to expect and what they were doing to make sure that votes were got in a timely manner. And then ballot tracking. The new system for this year, vote-by-mail ballots have always been sort of traceable in that you would know when they arrived. But the new Where's My Ballot or ballot track system actually allowed voters to subscribe to notifications. So instead of having to log into the website or call us every time they wanted an update on their ballot, if they subscribed to that system, which was a free system, they would get an email, a voicemail, or a text message, whichever one they chose, that would automatically alert them to where their ballot was in the process, which was a pretty cool addition for voters. Moving on to the voting system. Now, this is what you may have seen in national headlines. Rest assured, none of those issues or concerns that anybody would have in another state happened here. Butte County does use the Dominion voting system. We use version 510A here. It's the same system that we've been using for the last 5 elections in Butte County, going back to 2018. That system is subjected to logic and accuracy testing before every election. And that's not just a 2020 thing, that's just how California does it. We do logic and accuracy testing on the system. In just this year in 2020, that logic and accuracy test consisted of 20,000 test ballots being run through the system. Now those test ballots are pre-marked and we know what the expected results would be. So, this should come out with, 10,000 votes for this candidate and 11,000 votes for this other office. And then we're able to run it through the system and then check to make sure that the the machines are actually tabulating those votes correctly. It's passed with flying colors each of the 5 times we put it through that test. The system, so that happens before any voters' ballots are actually run through the process. The system is then reset. We run the 0 reports, and then it's ready for the actual election to be run through it. Following election day, we will then do the 1% manual tally that I talked about earlier, and that is to confirm, we knew it was working right when we started, and then it's a check, 2 days after the election to make sure it's still working properly. It recorded all of the real votes accurately, and again, passes flying colors, and it's passed 100% in all 5 elections. Now, the next element unique to Butte County, we did have an extension to count the ballots for our county. This is something that we had to get a court order to do. What happened was on December 8th, our office discovered vote-by-mail ballots in a sealed, secure ballot drop box in Chico, located at the BMU. That box was located just outside the front doors of the Bell Memorial Union at Chico State. That same day, we reported that incident to County Council and Secretary of State because those ballots were not included in our initial certification. We verified that that box was correctly locked and sealed at 8 p.m. on election night, which was the deadline to submit vote-by-mail ballots or ballots in general. And we were able to confirm that no ballots were submitted after that deadline. On December 10th, we successfully petitioned the Butte County Superior Court for an extension to the certification deadline to allow us to count those valid votes in the election. In total, there were 529 Butte County ballots in that box. 501 of those signatures have been verified. There are 28 of them that have been challenged. A signature could be challenged because either the voter didn't sign it or the signature on the envelope doesn't match the one on the voter registration. Those voters are going to get the same notification and time to cure their signatures as any other voter who voted in the election. They got 8 days from the date that we notified them, so their deadline to let us know is actually on Friday. So as of this Friday, we will be able to recertify the election results updated with those 501 plus maybe a couple ballots to be included in there. Countywide, those ballots really sort of scattered across all of our districts and all of our precincts. The effect of that was that there's actually no individual race that would be affected by those ballots being counted, with one exception. That would be Measure E in the city of Chico. Mathematically could be flipped by those ballots. We will get those results and find that out for sure. There was one Oroville City Council ballot with that race in that set. So that's not included in the election results that you've seen. There is one ballot that will be added before we recertify. And then the last slide here, I just want to take an opportunity to thank and express gratitude for our community partners and our election workers. From hired staff to volunteers through whether it's legalmen, voters, the sheriff's volunteers, or just members of the community coming out to help us out. They really did an amazing job making the largest election in Butte County history possible under possibly the worst circumstances possible, being in the middle of a pandemic. So I just want to thank all of our workers for really putting themselves on the line and making sure that voters' votes were recorded in the safest manner possible under less than ideal situation. So.
Thank you. I have a question. How come there are no identifying marks on the ballots themselves? They're only on the envelopes.
Well, one thing, it's against the law to be able to trace a ballot back to the voter. You have the right to have a secret ballot. If you could trace them back, it wouldn't be secret. So that's why you don't have any mark on the ballot that corresponds with the voter.
Because that leaves, I mean, and not saying that anything happened here in this county, but we can certainly see in other states where that has opened it up for major fraud.
I think the issue is that anytime a party wants to look at fraud, they've got to organize that prior to opening up the envelope. Once you open up the envelope and start counting, you can't marry them back. So you don't know who voted what ballot, okay? So if you're going to challenge their signatures, and some of these states, I don't think, had the procedures in place, the signatures on file to be able to challenge signatures. The time to challenge a signature or challenge that vote is before it's opened. And that is not what has happened nationwide.
Right.
And so That's what we do. We send out hundreds of letters here. And we got a lot of cure letters back, which we were grateful for. To me, I think our teachers better start teaching kids to write. I'm getting tired of looking at scribbles. But we did get the vast majority of them we were able to cure. We still have some that won't be, but because they never bothered to answer us. And so, there has to be a certain amount of what I call voter responsibility. So if you receive a letter that says you didn't sign your envelope or your signature didn't match, you need to verify that you were the voter and get back to us. And we do have some that did not, and so they're not going to count.
And I personally would like to say thank you, Candy, for the job that you do, because I know that you take your job very, very seriously, and you operate with the highest level of integrity, and I just appreciate that, because it makes us feel like we're in good hands, because all anyone really wants here that I know is a
It's a
fair
fair
shake.
election, and-
Yes.
And thank you very much. My staff has the same commitment to that making sure that everything is right. And as I've always said, if you doubt anything, come down and watch the process. Now, because these last ballots, that was an error. And what happened that night is it was locked at 8 o'clock. We have people that verified it was locked at 8 o'clock. There was no way to put another ballot in that box. But 2 people that were supposed to go out and retrieve those ballots, because it always takes 2 to retrieve ballots, and take them back in and then send them to our office in a locked, secure bag, didn't do it in the hurry to get everything probably wrapped up that night. So there they sat in plain sight, and I don't mean to laugh about it, but they certainly were not hidden. They were in that box just sitting there, okay? So because they could potentially affect the city of Chico race, the city clerk did come over, and she was amazed at the procedures we went through. And so I offer that to anybody here. When in doubt, come down and see us. We will take time to walk you through it, and you can see exactly what we're doing, because everything's open. But people sit at home and wait for us to flash it up on the web. They don't come down and see us anymore. We get kind of lonely down there, to tell you the truth. But, no, we do take it serious. It is very important. There are issues. I'm appalled at what has happened in other states. And I can't comment on what exactly went, because we weren't there. And in order to know what happened, you have to see it with your own eyes, and you have to know their procedures ahead of time. But I can tell you, because we already had vote by mail in place, and before we went to a voter assistance center, over 70% of our population was already voting by mail and did not use a polling place. And then after the campfire, I thought, people have dispersed all over our county. So in order to give them an equal chance at voting, because they may not have changed their address, they could go into any one of these vote centers and be able to vote. Because we had something like, 3,500 or more ballots that were undeliverables.
That's right.
So these unddeliverables, we send out this big batch, and back they come, undeliverable, because so many people between the 2 fires had moved in our county. And and then with the university and Butte College not being remote, we had a lot of changes of addresses there. So we did our best. We can always do better, but I want to assure you that our heart is in it, and we want to make sure that we count every ballot that can be counted.
Appreciate that. I have one more question. Now, you mentioned the students at Chico State. These students are here on a temporary basis. Are they eligible to vote here?
Yes. Yes.
So the legal term for that is domicile. So your residence address on your voter registration, it's not necessarily your residence, it's your domicile, which is where you consider to be your home or a place you intend to return to when you're away. So it's not an answer of, yes, all those students can vote here. It's of each student individually. Do you live here? Is this going to be your new home, or are you going back to your parents' house in Sacramento as soon as the semester ends? And with a vote by mail model being instituted across California, they could have just as easily registered and kept the registration in Sacramento and voted that ballot. Or if they moved away from home, they're gone, they're never going back home. Chico could be their new home, and that's for each student to make that decision for themselves.
Right. Yeah, because it's important that people have a vested interest in the area that they're voting in. I mean, that's the design, right?
Absolutely.
We don't, I mean, I wouldn't be comfortable with a lot of people coming here on a very temporary basis and determining the outcome of our office holders. That wouldn't be reflective of representing this area.
Well, that's why I
That
wanted to clarify instead of just saying, yes, the students can vote.
Yeah.
Yes, they can.
Thank you.
if the
That
criteria
clears
is met.
up quite a bit for me. I appreciate that. Councilmember Draper, did you wish to speak?
Yes, I did. This question is for Ms. Grubbs. I was really surprised to read about that drop box that was at Chico State. And I would have thought there would have been some kind of master list about where all the drop boxes were. And I'm wondering what Ms. Grubbs is planning to do to ensure that this doesn't happen again in the future.
Well, there is a list of where they all were, and that drop box had been emptied earlier in the day by the sheriff's stars. They went around to all of our exterior drop boxes during the day and picked up ballots and brought it back to us so we could work on those ballots before election night. That was simply an error. And I think there are ways that we can ensure that that doesn't happen by signing every drop box after 8 o'clock, at the 8 o'clock time, a specific bag that is what's that?
Serialized.
Serialized, that's the word I'm looking for. So we know that the ballots were emptied out of each one. I'm hopeful that the next time around we will not have this many. It is a logistics nightmare. But when you're working with, these weren't volunteers, they were paid, but they are still kind of like in a volunteer status, and things happen. But we cured it, and by going to the court, they thought that these ballots needed to be counted because they should have been in on election night, and they were just like everybody else. So we're treating them just like election night ballots.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Smith?
Yeah, I too, as the mayor has expressed, appreciate your professionalism, and I have no questions about that. However, I do have a question about the voter centers and allowable activities in those centers, because if there was a place for activities that may be questionable, it would probably be in there. So when you think about this, the voter assistance centers, what kind of assistance is an allowable activity when it comes to, filling out my ballot, so to speak? So I'm coming to a voter assistance center, I have my ballot, and I'm not sure what to do with it. I mean, can they actually
All
fill
right.
it out there? Can people help them with that process?
They can either vote there, or they can get a vote by mail ballot, take it somewhere else, take it home and vote it, and return it by 8 p.m., yes. Just like Keaton went over, the legislature passed laws that allowed people to vote or to register to vote on Election Day. So they have to go to that center or to our location. So they can register, they can vote, they can get assistance if they need language assistance. That's what most of that is about. They can get, they were actually set up for the disabled. If they need assistance in voting, those machines can handle that. They have, what do you want to call that?
Well,
Pad.
they're ballot marking devices.
Yeah.
They have an audio tactile interface, which
Yeah.
would allow any voter with a disability to be able to mark their ballot independently. And that's obviously our goal. Every voter has a right to cast their vote independently and privately. So if at all possible, we provide as little assistance as necessary to let that voter be able to cast their vote.
Yeah.
We do have, if a voter needs additional services, if a voter needs additional services from our staff, maybe they don't have a family member with them or a friend that can help them out, our staff can provide assistance marking their ballots, but those are all then documented on a log, which voter was helped, when they were helped, and who helped them.
And who helped them? That's
Exactly
yeah.
right. So, obviously the goal is to let every voter do it on their own and provide them the resources they need to do that, but.
It's just been so long, I've been doing this by mail for so long, I kind of forgot what that looks like,
Right.
at the center. So, but, so it's staff that, so if I need assistance, I bring in an unfilled out ballot and I need some help with that. It's going to be an election official then, but I need some help.
If you need help, it would be an election official, yes.
Okay, that's great.
One of those that is trained. And this year, they had 2 days of 4 hours each of training on the equipment as well as our procedures. And gosh, I think some of our multi-centers had something 11 people or more there. Wasn't it 11? I think so.
BMU, Chico State, there was more than 20, I think.
More than
on
20
election day,
helping
so.
people. There just because if you remember the primary, we had an issue with BMU because the professors turned students loose in the afternoon on election day and said go. And when we had been open for 10 days for voting, and sent them, and of course they were there till midnight standing in line to vote, and that we never wanted to see that happen again. So we cured that by having a lot of people, and actually 2 centers in one, multiple people to handle and multiple lines. So, but of course, the students, for the most part, were not there either. They weren't in session because they were doing remote sessions. So we had our number of students were less. But yes.
Yeah, I guess you could see kind of the concern. So if somebody had a particular bent and they were assisting a lot of people in a small jurisdiction like Oroville, boy, just moving the needle a few inches could make a big,
that is
be a
not,
big
when
deal.
it means assistance, it doesn't mean like that.
Yeah.
And the voter has to ask for assistance.
Yeah.
In other words, maybe they can't read. But most people, and we've had those with limited English, they are allowed to bring a person with them to help them at the voting location.
Okay.
So
Great. Well, thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate that.
I'm sorry if I missed it, but who did you say supervises that on site?
there's a manager, and then the staff above. And the manager is paid a little bit more than the rest and has more
They're-
intensive training.
Employed by you?
Yes,
Okay,
they're all employed by us.
okay. Councilmember Pittman?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the words the mayor used, and you guys did a great job. And also appreciate, I know our city clerk over there, Jackie, got a chance to go through your facility, and I was more than happy to listen to her description of it. I didn't have time to make it through there, so we appreciate that. Two questions I have. One is, can you tell me why and how you selected the Dominion version you did? And then two, people have asked me about the ballots that were supposedly mailed out in California, not necessarily this county, but ballots were mailed out when people didn't ask for absentee ballots. Did that actually occur, or what's your?
Okay, let me answer that last question. There were many counties that were not vote-by-mail counties prior to this. And then the legislature, was it the legislature or our governor?
Executive order and then-
Executive order.
and
And
then-
then the legislature followed up with that and validated it, that everybody would be voting by mail except for these centers that would assist people. So we call them voter assistance centers here. And since we already had our procedures in place, you didn't hear the complaints, well, wait a minute. You know, we're used to polling places. So other counties had hybrid systems. They tried to educate their people. They had a lot of different variations than we had. But overall, I think it went very well. Of course, we're, feeling sorry about this ballot sitting there in that ballot box, but we wanted to assure everybody that we tried, when we got it back, to try to stuff a ballot in anywhere. Couldn't do it. It was totally locked. And the first thing I could think of is, let's call the Secretary of State, let's get county council on this, let's get some direction on, because I felt that those ballots should be counted. They would have been counted on election night if a mistake had not been made.
Yeah, appreciate
And
that.
that's what it was.
The short answer to your question about the unsolicited vote by mail ballots, unsolicited, the term you used, they were required by California law to be sent out, and that's why they were sent out.
Yeah.
It was required. So that's why every active registered voter in California got one. So to say unsolicited, they did register to vote and ask to vote in the
Somewhere, yeah,
election, so
okay.
that they provided their address and identifying information so that they can receive those. As far as the voting system, you asked about the Dominion voting system. In 2018, when we made that switch, it was it's state of the art, and still is. It's top of the line, fully auditable. Everything's traceable through that system. It allows us to process ballots significantly faster and provide more accurate, earlier results, specifically on election night. And then just anytime, if, for example, coffee gets spilled on a ballot. In the past, we have to make those corrections sort of on paper and then run the ballot back through again so it can be read. And there was no way to trace what happened, how that ballot got changed. But in this Dominion voting system, you would know what time that ballot was corrected to remove stains or whatever the case may be, and when it went back to the system, and you can trace that back to the specific workstation that it was at.
Gotcha.
So there's just far more capability with that system than anything we've ever used before, and that's why the change
Yeah,
was made back in 2018.
there's a lot more audit. But I doubt that the other states had in place some of the procedures that we have. And I want to assure you, it's not the equipment. When they say the equipment, any equipment can be hacked, any computer, but they're not joined with anything. They're not on the internet in our state. There's nothing that passes over there. They're solely independent. And actually, that touchscreen that is out there is nothing more than a ballot marking device. Because you touch the screen, take your choices, it prints out, you look at it, yep, that's what I want, and you put it in the ballot box. That's exactly it. And that way, if you want larger print, or if you need to use the audio because you can't see it and you want to hear it, that it's all right there. So I really would like to go and understand what has happened and where it went amiss. But again, anytime you suspect that something is wrong, you've got to say so before those ballots are out of those envelopes. There's no way of tracing it back.
Well, you mentioned the 510A system. Are there other Dominion systems that others are using?
There's various versions. When we started, it was 5.2, and it's gotten better and improved over time.
Okay, so you guys have upgraded.
Yeah, we're using the most recent model. In the primary, we used 510. We're now using 510A. So we're staying on the front lines of that system, the most secure, like I said, fully auditable system that we can use.
I also have to compliment you on the ballot boxes themselves. They look like they're built like a Sherman tank. I mean, they're really heavy duty. I'm curious, how did you get the funding for those? That's a lot of money, I'm sure.
We have, and you will be the recipient of some of this, we have been able to get some grant money.
Wow.
And once we get all the bills in, then every entity that we held an election for will have a credit for their portion of the grant. How about that?
That's cool. Thank
That's cool. Okay, we can all handle that.
you. We can do that.
So I'll
Thank
put
you.
myself on the line of giving you a credit. But right now, we don't know how much we're going to get back. We're still putting things together and submitting. Your bills on this election will probably come out late January. And then we hope the state pays off. A little caveat to that, the Secretary of State bought some stuff and the state controller doesn't want to pay for it, doesn't want to honor the bill. It's $32 million worth. So you guys know you've been in government long enough to know who's at the bottom of the food chain, and that's local government. So are all those grants going to be paid for? I hope so. I hope they'll honor all of them that we send in. It was for, we got for all kinds of different equipment.
Cybersecurity,
Yeah.
accessibility for voters, additional ballot marking devices at the voter assistance center, drop boxes, training for staff for COVID-related things, sneeze guards, all that stuff is covered in those grants.
Okay,
And believe me, we are applying for every dollar we can get.
thank you.
Thank you. I thought you'd appreciate
Yeah,
that.
we would.
Okay.
We
Well,
do.
thank you so much. It doesn't look like we have any more questions. We really appreciate you coming and explaining all of that.
Yeah.
to
Well,
us.
I appreciate you
you.
guys. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, we're going to open this up for public communication. This is hearing of non-agenda items. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone from the public who wishes to comment on any non-agenda items?
Are there any public members wishing to speak on non-agenda items?
Yes, the cameraman.
Okay.
Good evening, Oroville City Council. I wish you guys could see me right now. I'm a bit of the festive mood, but we have to social distance and do these things over the telephone now. So, little end of year wrap up. Primarily, I'd like to address is that I have some unaddressed complaints from 2019 with the Oroville Police Department. And I left a message at the 30th of November for the lieutenant to get back to me, and he hasn't gotten back to me regarding those complaints, and here it is, almost the end of the year. Now, I know they have a year to take up to respond to these complaints, but considering these complaints are from 2019, and we're almost at the end of 2020, there should be a response by now. Another case I'm investigating, also involving the officer that some of you may remember I spoke about earlier this year that had a crash at the intersection of Feather River Boulevard and Oro Dam Boulevard 162. He was involved in another incident, a hit and run that occurred on Montgomery on the 6th of November. He rear-ended a woman, and he knew it. He acknowledged it because the person stated in their post that when they turned around and looked at him, the officer put up his hands and shrugged like he didn't know what happened, and then he took off from the scene. From what the poster indicated in their post, that the chief had called them, and I guess the matter, they're dealing with it, but that still doesn't change the fact of there was an alleged hit and run. If you, from my understanding in the state of California, no matter who you are, if you hit somebody with your car and then you take off and you don't stop and exchange information or assess the damage, that's hit and run, bottom line. And so I filed a request to CHP for records. They have yet to get back to me on that, but I spoke to the officer, and he was very apprehensive about taking a report. He eventually took the
Thank you,
post,
sir. Your time is up.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not seeing anyone else on the screen that wishes to speak on this item.
Okay, at this time, we're going to close public communication. Looking for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, I would like to continue item number 2 until the second meeting in January.
Looking for a motion to adopt the consent calendar with item number 2 pulled and continued.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Goodson?
Yes.
Councilmember Draper?
Yes.
Motion carries with 7 yeses and 0 nos.
Okay, now we are going to open the meeting up for public hearings. I have one item for public hearing. The Village at Ruddy Creek subdivision, including general plan amendment GPA 20-01, zoning amendment ZC 20-02, tentative subdivision map TSM 20-01, and a proposed annexation.
Mr. Mayor, we have Mr. Wes Irvin, the city planner. He's appearing virtually, who will be presenting this item.
Mr. Irving, are you there?
He is his, Wes, you need to unmute yourself. There you go.
How's that?
That's good. We
Can you hear me all right now?
Yes, sir.
All right. For those of you around in 2007, you will remember that back then this council approved a 172 unit Ruddy Creek subdivision on 2 parcels totaling about 24 acres. The recession hit just after, and so that project was never completed. Today, before you, by the same owner, is a less dense subdivision of 97 homes on the same 2 parcels. Working with the applicant, features of the following of the proposed subdivision include all 97 lots are about 6,000 square feet, some are larger, but this fits nicely into our R1 zoning criteria. All lots along the southern edge, which are lots numbers 30 through 43, will be conditioned to be 1 story as a concession to the neighbors in the south. The revised map you have was approved by the Planning Commission, but is now changed with stormwater retention moved to away from the retention basin that was originally in Lot A to all be retained on site via pipes under the streets. And Matt Thompson, the city engineer, is here to answer any question, but the pipes and the outlets will be appropriately sized for a 100-year storm event. Also, Wes Gilbert, the city and the applicant's engineer, is available for questions on drainage. A 6-foot-high wooden fence will circle the entire perimeter of all the lots. And outside the fence on Feather Avenue and 18th will be landscaping. Norma Street, which stubs into the south side of the proposed subdivision, will be connected to the subdivision, while Marjorie, which also stubs, will become a 25-foot wide bicycle, fire access, and utility easement. And this was requested specifically by the Thermalito Water and Sewer District. There is a 3.65 acre residual Lot A, which is in the Ruddy Creek floodplain, while the rest of the lots are outside of the flood zone. To fulfill the applicant's parkland dedication requirement, the applicant and the Feather River Recreation and Park District have worked out an agreement whereby that the applicant will create a looped trail on that lot sometime before the first 25 units are built, and then donate it to the Feather River. And that agreement is still pending with the Feather River Board, but Sean Rohrabacher is also here from Feather River to answer any questions you might have. Regarding trees, we are asking council direction tonight. As noted on page 45 of the staff report, enough oak trees have grown on the site since the project was approved in 2007 to trigger our tree mitigation ordinance. So the Planning Commission felt with the consultant counted up all the trees and determined that 1,344 inches of replacement trees would have to be planted. The Planning Commission felt that was a punitive and infeasible, and asked staff to work out a more reasonable mitigation to present to council. So you will see that staff has looked into this. Wade Atterbury, our tree arborist, has suggested 270 inches of replacement trees, some on the subdivision and street trees, and some on the Lot A, the lower lot in the flood zone. This is the maximum that we think is feasible to do. Applicant has made a case and requests waiving the tree mitigation requirement in this case. So we'll be asking council direction on that. Lastly, regarding the tentative map, this is a map that creates new lots, but without a housing project as of yet. For that reason, The ordinance proposes a set of development standards to ensure an attractive, well-built subdivision. We note that the applicant is likely to phase development so that the homes can be built over time to allow any future builder more flexibility for financing and infrastructure costs. As stated earlier, well, as not stated earlier, Chuck LaFlame, landowner and applicant, and engineer Wes Gilbert are here to answer any questions you might have. So staff requests approval of the 5 recommended actions, and we're here for questions.
Madam Clerk, do we have any questions from the public on this item?
Members of the public on Zoom, can you please either use the raise your hand feature or the chat box to let me know that you wish to speak on this item? Mr. Mayor, I do have up first, going by the initials of KB, wishing to speak on this item.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi. My name is Kathy, and I'm showing you a picture of Ruddy Creek from 2005 when it was flooding at Biggs Avenue at the end of Alma. And this water crossed Biggs Avenue into a house that sits low right by Ruddy Creek Court. I would like to address that the wetland delineation for this project be updated to a current 2020 report. Many of the reports and the mitigation are using previous documents from anywhere from 2008, 2007, and the Thermalito irrigation has a hazard mitigation report with Butte County that specifically says Ruddy Creek has major flooding issues and it's been documented in that document from 2019. I feel that the planner of this development, that they're jumping a little too quickly to recommend it to the city council for review because they haven't done their homework in the 2020 year that we are. There are major drainage issues as far as waiving the mitigation, making adjustments using $15,000 of SB2 funding to give the applicant. The property has been an illegal dump site with 2 open ordinance violations on it. So the property owner has not been a good neighbor. If you talk to engineer, they're changing the detention pond, but it will still drain into Ruddy Creek, which brings up the Army Corps of Engineer. And I have questions about the reported wetlands. I requested the Freedom of Information Act on this.
Excuse me, ma'am, your time is up. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, our next speaker would be Bobby O'Reilly.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I too share the same concern about the Ruddy Creek drainage. I have many family members and friends who live right along the Ruddy Creek, and during the winter months, that creek, if not maintained correctly, which it's not a lot of the times, that creek backs up and it does indeed flood many people's properties all along the creek from the 16th Avenue subdivision, the new stuff out there, all the way down past the area that's in question here. By the looks of this map that I'm looking at, it looks like this is the old mansion property, if I'm not mistaken. And I share the sentiments that the previous speaker shared, that the property owner of this property has been extremely negligent in keeping garbage, trash, people, everything out of this property. They have been very uncooperative with all agencies and all people trying to help in keeping garbage out of this property. And I think they need to, before they are handed money to create this great thing, I think they need to take initiative and responsibility in cleaning up their property and being responsible for their property first. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, there is someone by the name of TJ that typed up something. I'm not sure if they want to speak on this item. I'm not seeing them unmuted. It looks like those two are the only two speakers on this item. I did receive multiple written communication items, which you all have received either in the packet or by email prior to the meeting.
Thank you. Those will be available on the city website.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any comments from this dais? Councilmember
I have a
Smith.
question.
Yeah, so just directed at Wes and perhaps the attorney, in reading all of the letters that were forwarded onto us, it seems to be a recurring theme as far as the flooding issue, and then reviewing newspaper articles going back to 2005. And there is obviously some concerns with that as an issue in that area. So allowing this project to go forward, in my experience, when things are developed and there is a known problem, that it actually can improve that issue. And then reading through some of the documentation that's been submitted by the city in this process, it kind of looks like that perhaps the concerns would potentially be mitigated by this project moving forward. So I just want someone to speak from staff here to speak to that issue, because that's a big concern.
I can start, and then maybe Matt or Wes Gilbert will pick it up because they're really experts on drainage and such. My understanding is that a new project of any type that's creating an impermeable surface has to capture all of the additional floodwaters that might occur in a rain event or in a storm event, and then meter it out so that it does not in any way exacerbate an existing flooding situation. Regarding the low land and the house there at Biggs, we did look at the study that was done there, and yes, always the bridge there has been a little bit low, and the culvert under the so it tends to create a little bit of flooding there at Ruddy Creek and Biggs. It's my understanding that this project would not be responsible for fixing any existing flooding problem, just not exacerbating anything that exists now. Anybody like to add?
Well, Wes, I want to disagree with you. You sounded like an expert to me. I think you were spot on. It's the developer's responsibility to make sure that this development doesn't aggravate the situation. And like the council member admitted, it's probably going to make it a little better in the long run.
All right, is that it, Councilmember Smith?
I
Okay.
just wanted to vet that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Pittman?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate staff's work on this. I believe there's a little over 300 pages to the supporting documentation for this, and as my job is to read it all. I've read majority of it and each detail. And I kind of know the history of this property going back prior to 2007. I believe it might have been zoned for a mobile home park. So the applicant, or maybe before the applicant, changed that zoning to single-family residential, which I appreciate. That's more of our quality type of homes that we're looking toward. So having this project, I think, is a positive in terms of helping our housing inventory stock and mitigating the problems out there. Referencing Ruddy Creek, that's been a county problem since the levees were put in to build the forebay and the afterbay. And it starts at 16th Street and it goes right on down. It's been a county problem and it has not been addressed. I would hope one day the city could at least look at the problem and improve the situation. We had the same problem in the city along Dry Creek. And Dry Creek now, it has reached a point in time where it doesn't flood the normal places it used to flood. And some of you might remember water running across Oro Dam Boulevard right by, what's the name of that coffee shop? Dutch Brothers. I can remember the water being 1.5 feet deep on Oro Dam Boulevard. And the same thing on Oro Dam Boulevard at the, we used to call it the bowling alley. It's now, what was it, Rite Aid now, I guess? Yeah. That used to be a constant flooding problem. But the city worked on solutions and retention basins, dikes, diversions, and all of those things that are flood control methods. And you're only going to get flood control with development. It's not going to happen without the city constantly working on the effort. And I've read all the concerns in the letters and I appreciate your contributions to this effort. We all take those seriously. I want to say there's at least 20 or more emails alone that we've received. And I appreciate that because at the end of the day, we'll probably have a much greater project and a much greater addition to our community. We need homes built. And I look at this as one of the good projects that'll help out with that measure and reach the goal of having some good market rate housing that'll be available to folks out there. And the other thing about being a mess, well, we have a population in this community that causes problems. They illegally trespass and they illegally dump stuff on people's property. And it's a constant common denominator. If you can see the orchard up on Table Mountain, finally it was ripped out and torn down and being burned, and that was all the expense of the landowner. The landowner also, I have to respect, has certain rights when he buys that piece of property. And if the landowner, within the rules and regulations we have in our ordinances, wants to build something within those rules and regulations, I'm all for it. I think it's a great idea. I will say that the landowner here did voluntarily do some additional fire breaks. There was an incident out, I believe, started nearby that property and by some folks dragging them. I think it was a mattress on fire or something around there, and caused a considerable fire and did damage to other people's property. This landowner happened to voluntarily put additional fire breaks around his property that he was not required to do. The county didn't require that. This individual met to the city standards and put, I believe, a grader or dozer light around the property. So there's been a good effort here on all, and I think it's a great project for our community. I think it can move forward and help us meet the goal of providing better market rate housing. It's appropriate location. It's probably the highest and best use for the real estate. And I see here now probably support for the position. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Member Goodson.
Yes, I believe I will just try and keep this to one question, and it's in regard to the fiscal impact. It's my understanding that the staff has requested the approval of using $15,000 of the supplemental benefit to grant funds to forgive the applicant costs that are associated with the MND, the mitigated negative declaration. So my question is, what would be the reason for defraying that study cost? Our staff, our city has already incurred approximately $23,000 in unreimbursed costs for the preparation for this project. So why would the applicant not be billed, which is customary, for the current cost and all additionals? I do have reservations in regards to this project moving forward, one of which is the traffic impact. I had the opportunity to explore not once but twice this month, going and having boots on the ground in that area. Traffic impact is a concern. I'm not going to get into the other issues. We have been inundated, and I appreciate all the public's responses and their correspondence. They've been analytical, methodical, taken a lot of time. So thank you so much for sending those concerns to the city staff and council.
Wes, could you please speak to what our SB $2 and what that grant was for?
Yes, it's unfortunate that the SB It actually does not stand for Supplemental Benefits Fund. It stands for a Senate bill in which this body in January approved a grant application for, I think it was $165,000 to encourage new housing development. And it's a piece of state legislation. So we have $165,000 to include supporting new housing development. And one of the definitions that we put into this grant was to help the 11 subdivisions that were approved in the 2005, 2006, 2007 timeframe, whose maps had expired, help expedite the reapproval of those projects and to get them built more quickly, all as encouraged by the state through this legislation. So that's what we're doing. We're using this Senate Bill 2 funds up to $15,000 for this subdivision, and we're hoping to encourage other subdivisions to do the same and then defray the costs of some of the studies that are required.
Thank you, Wes, and I'm so used to when I see SB, I was aware that it is a Senate bill, but my second line had came out and said supplemental. So thank you.
And with regard to traffic, we did look at the traffic.
No. Go on, Wes, I do know.
Oh, okay. Well, we looked at this is a less dense project, which will create less traffic coming out onto 162. And with the new striping and the new paving and the new lanes that are now available to get on and off of 162, it was our assessment that there would not be significant traffic impacts, and we so stated in the mitigated negative declaration.
Thank you, Wes.
Councilmember Draper.
Yes, I have a couple of questions for Wes. One of them is, I noted that he said 1,344 inches of replacement trees were at first recommended, and the Planning Commission then felt that 270 was more appropriate. And I'm just curious, how many trees is 270 inches?
That's about 70 trees. I'm sorry. They're about 2 inches each. So that's about 70 trees could be replanted.
Okay, and so then how many trees are going to be cut down?
The tree study analysis done by Gilbert for this project indicated that there were about 58 trees that exceeded the 6 inches diameter breast height that triggers the mitigation ordinance. Most of those trees, because they were volunteers and they're smaller trees, were in the 6 to 9 or 6 to 10 inch range. And so when you count 58 trees and you added it all up times 2, which is what the ordinance requires, you have 1,344 inches. Wade Atterbury went out and concluded that about half of the street trees in the new subdivision, which are required to be planted, could be oaks, and the another 30 or so trees could be planted down in Lot A as mitigation. But that was about all that could be effectively done. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. It really does. One more thing occurred to me. Why hasn't this project been presented to Butte County, since it is in the county so far? Do you know?
I don't.
I can. This is Scott Huber. I can address that issue. if a, and I'll turn on my camera for those that are watching from home. If a project applicant desires a project to ultimately be in a city, they can get a conditional approval from a city, conditional upon both approval by the city council and upon annexation. So what they do is the next step is that the city would have to approve this for the project as well as for annexation. Then it would go to LAFCO for ultimate annexation. All of those steps have to happen before this can go off. If it doesn't happen, or if the annexation is not approved, then it would have to go back to Butte County for their planning commission, assuming that were the case. But the issue is if a developer or someone who's building a large development like this, if they want the ultimate homes to be in the city, then the entire process is controlled by the city, including the annexation.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You bet. And while I have the microphone, Mr. Mayor, can I take just one point of, I want to make
Yes,
sure
sir.
that we've got a couple of I's dotted and T's crossed. Because I have not visited this property, but I want to make sure that we don't have any council members that are within 500 feet of this property. And this is the closest boundary, this is the closest edge of any property you own to the closest edge of of the proposed project.
I'm not sure how, and that was my question I was going to ask you. I'm not sure if I live within 500 feet, but I'm pretty close to this property.
Well, I would suggest that we find out, because if you do, then you should not be hearing any of this. You should recuse yourself. So I would, if that's the case, my suggestion is we take a 2 or 3 minute break and let's pull up a map and we can do some GIS. And it's from, and I think we've got some staff doing it now, is from the closest edge of any part of your property line to the closest edge of this project.
He's going to check yours too.
Can I ask him a question, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hatley.
Thank you. I always abstain from anything around there, from the airport.
Yes.
Out in that area, and that was a question that I was also kind of concerned about, because where my property lies, my house, that's
Yeah,
to the edge of my property, because I have 5 acres.
sure.
To where this property is. And again, I've always erred on the side of caution, and I don't plan on changing that way of doing business.
Right.
So maybe right now, even if it says I'm over 500 feet, it still kind of goes against my grain to.
If you have any inkling that you would like to recuse yourself, then I suggest you do that.
Okay.
And Councilmember Hatley, you have been consistent over the years. If it even beyond the 500-foot line, it used to be 300 feet, but even beyond, now that it's beyond that to 500 feet, even beyond that, if there's any inkling that this may somehow financially affect the value of your property, then I would suggest you recuse yourself.
I'm not within 500 feet, but,
Mr. Huber, just for clarity, both Councilperson Hatley and Vice Mayor Thompson are over 1,000 feet from the project, according to the maps that we have present. But in the abundance of caution, if the council people would wish to recuse themselves, we certainly understand.
Again, to clarify, I'm outside of the boundaries, but in my opinion, I'm close enough where it's going to affect the price of my home.
Then I would suggest you recuse yourselves.
Do I need to make that statement? Or?
No, I think the record is abundantly clear.
Okay, Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, just back to the flood mitigations, and obviously Biggs Avenue is going to remain, at least for the time being, in the county jurisdiction. And Wes has already indicated that there's a concern with that. And this whole project still has to go back to LAFCO, I would assume, for finalization of this process. I don't know if there's a way to note a concern. Again, flooding, we can't control what Mother Nature does, and when she does her thing, I'm just in general concerned about flooding impacts. I can see where the project and all of the I's have been dotted, T's have been crossed, that perhaps this project will not create an additional problem. because of the retention pond and all the pieces that are done. But I'm just thinking in terms of what we can do as a city to encourage the county to do the right thing, and if there's corrections that need to be made. And now that we're kind of putting our finger, over here and we're getting more involved, if there is something that we can do, or in the process with LAFCO, there's additional mitigations, because these are concerns. These are real concerns that, if in the future more of that neighborhood is annexed into the city, we're going to incur these, these issues and responsibilities maybe sooner than later. And so I'm just forward thinking a couple of moves out. And just, kind of just pushing a little bit more on this issue with that bridge, the Biggs Avenue piece, and just all those concerns. Again, I don't know if there's any way to answer that, or if this is something that we're just going to pick up and have to deal with in the future. As far as the project, the need for housing, that goes without saying. Obviously, we need it. Just thinking about all the fires and the need of housing is pressing. And if we can do this project without creating an additional problem, I'm definitely all for it. But I'm just thinking in terms of the bigger picture, enhancing this area, dealing with the flooding concerns that have existed outside of our control. And then so just if we can maybe lean on that, I think that would be a good thing.
Well, Councilperson Smith, what city staff can do is we will certainly reach out to Butte County Public Works and see what they can do to address issues that are in the county. And we would also encourage those that live out there to contact their supervisors and also contact the county to see what they can do to mitigate those impacts.
Thank you.
Councilmember Pittman.
Yeah, thank you. This question is probably for Wes, and if my recollection brings back, this particular property used to be agricultural and had an orchard. I believe it was citrus trees and olive trees. I'm not sure which, but it was agricultural purposes. If those trees were still present, would we still have the same tree mitigation that is being proposed in this discussion?
Absolutely not. We have an oak tree mitigation ordinance, and it's really targeted to our sort of the eastern side of the city with where the oak woodlands exist in abundance.
So the applicant is kind of stuck with the problem that the trees were removed and some oak trees voluntarily grew on the property, and then the mitigation occurs. Is that an accurate picture?
Yes. Chuck LaFlame might want to speak to that issue too, because he might want to make his case for no mitigation at all.
Mr. LaFleur.
Yeah, this is Chuck. The reason why I asked for to get rid of the mitigation is that the property had been, since the late 1800s, an agricultural property. It was an orchard when I bought it back in 1978 or so. It isn't an oak woodland area like up in the foothills, and it just seems like to be required to mitigate for oak trees on an ex-ag property for a subdivision just seems a little bit unfair. So that's really most of what I have to say.
Do we have any other questions from this dais? Mr. Attorney, I have a question for you. Do you want us to vote on these resolutions independently or as one item?
I would actually defer to the city clerk or the assistant city clerk as to what would be easier. From a legal standpoint, it doesn't matter as long as the vote is clear. I would say whatever is easier, but it's whatever the preference of the council is.
Mr. Mayor, if I could.
Councilmember Draper, did you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to emphasize here that I counted the emails that we received from residents of that area, and it's over 50. And I have read them all, although I have not responded to them all. And my thinking is when you have that many people in an area that are against a project, and I did not get one email in favor of it, that raises some red flags. And the other thing, if there are 97 homes built out there, most people have 2 cars. So we're probably talking almost 200 additional cars driving out in that area, in addition to the flood issues. So I think that there are some real serious problems with the project. Thank you.
Appreciate that. I actually got several letters from residents of Chico. Have no idea why they're interested in this project, but all of the letters pretty much read the same with different names on them. So anyone's welcome to look at them online. So, Madam Clerk, what did you want to see as far as the vote being clear?
Mr. Mayor, whatever is easiest for the council, you can vote on them individually or as a group.
What we'd really like, Mr. Mayor, is just the motion and the second are clear. If the council desires to make the motion should include a reading of each. I make a motion that we approved adoption of resolution number 8911.
Understand.
Read each one so that it is very clear what your motion is and what your second is.
With that, actually, Mr. Legron, I would suggest let's do them one at a time.
Okay.
Okay. Looking for a motion to adopt resolution number 8911.
I'll make the motion to approve resolution 8911. Say that again, number again?
8911.
8911, as agendized in our agenda.
Does he need to read the whole thing? No, that's fine. I'll second.
Councilmember Goodson? Councilmember Goodson?
I did,
I'm sorry, I can't.
no.
Councilmember Draper?
I vote no.
She said no.
Goodson.
Yes.
Did she say yes?
No, Goodson voted no.
The motion carries with 3 yeses, 2 noes, and 2 are recused.
For the record, let's actually identify that.
Okay.
The motion carries with 3 yeses from Pittman, Reynolds, and Smith, 2 noes from Draper and Goodson, and abstentions from Hatley and Thompson.
I hate to interject, but we are also looking for some sort of direction on the tree mitigation.
I would make a motion that we go along with staff's recommendation on the tree mitigation of our city arborist. I don't remember the inches, but it seems reasonable.
170.
Yeah, our city arsonist recommendation would be my motion, if that's enough direction you need.
The city arborist.
Arborist.
Not arsonist.
Oh, arborist.
We have one of those. We don't have one of those.
Not that we know, anyway.
Thank you very much.
But to be
Looking
clear,
for a second.
To be clear, Councilmember Pittman, your motion is that you move that you support the city's recommendation of the mitigation of the ultimate of 270 replacement inches of trees.
Exactly.
And Wes, did I appropriately recount what your recommendation was?
270 inches.
Okay.
Good. About 135 trees.
Yeah.
Looking for a second?
I'll second.
Councilmember Goodson?
No.
Councilmember Draper?
No.
The motion carries with yeses of Pittman, Reynolds, and Smith, noes of Goodson and Draper, and recused, we have Hatley and Thompson.
Okay, next item is waive the first reading and introduce by title only ordinance number 1851.
So I make a motion that we waive the first reading and introduce by title only ordinance number 1851.
I'll second that motion.
Oops. Councilmember Goodson,
No.
Councilmember Draper.
No.
The motion carries with Pittman, Reynolds, and Smith as yeses, Draper and Goodson as no, and recused we have Hatley and Thompson.
Moving on, looking for a motion to adopt resolution number 8916.
I'll make a motion, we approve Resolution 8916 as agenda-sized in tonight's agenda.
I'll second.
Councilmember Goodson,
No.
Councilmember Draper.
No.
The motion carries with Pittman, Reynolds, and Smith as yes, Draper and Goodson as no, Hatley and Thompson have recused themselves.
Moving on, looking for a motion to adopt resolution number 8917.
I move that we adopt resolution number 8917.
I'll second that.
Councilmember Goodson,
No.
Councilmember Draper.
No.
The motion carries with 3 yeses of Pittman, Reynolds, and Smith, 2 noes of Draper and Goodson, and 2 recusals of Hatley and Thompson.
Looking for a motion to approve the use of $15,000 of Senate Bill 2 grant funds to help applicant defray mitigated negative declaration preparation costs.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Councilmember Goodson,
No.
Councilmember Draper. Councilmember Draper.
I'm sorry, I was muted. No.
The motion carries with 3 yeses of Pittman, Reynolds, and Smith, 2 noes of Draper and Goodson, and 2 recused, Hatley and Thompson.
At this time, we'll wait for council members Hatley and Vice Mayor Thompson to return. Madam Clerk, note for the record that Councilmember Hatley and Vice Mayor Thompson have returned. Moving on to regular business. We're looking at an agreement with Wes Irvin and Associates Planning Services.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. The item we have before you tonight is to enter into a contractual agreement with Mr. Wes Irvin and Associates to provide professional planning services for the city of Oroville. Currently, we are receiving those services through a contractor called Bureau Veritas. We are going to be contracting directly with Wes Irvin, who is our current city planner that is working for the city. How this benefits the city is our contractual hourly obligation to Bureau Veritas is $135 per hour. With Mr. Irvin, we're receiving the same service, the same amount of service, the same person at $110 an hour. That will result in a $25 an hour savings at 24 hours per week. That will result in a net savings to the city of $32,000. So what we're asking for is authorization to enter into the contract with Mr. Wes Irvin. He has provided all the necessary agreements, insurances, and professional certifications to fulfill the duties of city planner.
Thank you. Do we have any comments or from the public, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, I do have a KB with their hand raised for this item.
KB?
Hello? Hi. I wanted to speak on this item because I have reached out to Wes as the city planner since September, October, and I feel that there's a transparency issue, particularly with his efforts. I also question why he's present in this meeting when you guys are going to vote whether to keep him or not. But this project for Ruddy Creek particularly started obviously months and months ago, and it was only brought to the public recently. I received notification of this meeting, I believe on Thursday. It's the first meeting I have received notification of. I went to the city hall to ask to see documents. Everything given to me was 13 years old. As I sat there for 45 minutes, I had to ask again for current documents, and Wes brought them out and said, oh, I misunderstood you. Oh, here's the ones for 2020. So I question having this be the Oroville City Planner, especially as you're moving forward to develop something that doesn't have current documentation.
And just, Mr. Mayor, just for clarity to the question regarding this item, Mr. Irvin currently is a contract employee with Bureau Veritas. We are just essentially going directly to the individual as opposed to contracting through a third.
Sorry.
That is why Mr. Irvin is here tonight and why he is present at the meeting.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public?
Mr. Mayor, I do not see anyone else wishing to speak on this item.
Vice Mayor Thompson wishes to speak.
Just a quick question in regards to PERS. So I see the hourly changing, but can you explain as far as the ramifications to our PERS?
There is no ramification. This is a contract employee. This is a consulting service, and we are hiring them as a consultant. There are no backside costs to this. It's $110 per hour. That's all inclusive and out the door.
Thank you.
Councilmember Pittman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate this contract. I think over the years, we've had difficulty maintaining planning directors, planning services. I've seen a whole cadre of them, and this is probably the most efficient and effective I've ever seen for this city. So my compliments to Wes, and my also other compliments that he's willing to stick on and stay on and help us out. His experience is exceptional, and his knowledge of planning is just what this city needs right now. So I'm in total support of this.
Are there any other comments from the dais? Having none, looking for a motion to adopt resolution number 8915.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Goodson?
Yes.
Councilmember Draper?
Yes.
The motion carries with 7 yeses and 0 nos.
Thank you. Wes, welcome to the show. Looking forward to growing our community with you. All right, moving on to reports, discussions, and correspondence. Do we have any announcements or reports from council members? Councilmember Smith.
So this week we had a COC meeting. It was brought to the Continuum of Care Board that there is an additional $400,000+ HEAP money that's going to be brought back for consideration. So several of our local agencies have, it looks like that they're going to be putting in for that money. So we'll have additional dollars for several of our agencies that service the unhoused. So stand by and I'll report out when that decision is made at the next council meeting.
Thank you. Anyone else? Moving on to future agenda items. Is there anyone who wishes to see anything on the agenda? Having none, moving on to administration reports.
I just have one thing, Mr. Mayor. I just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and thank everybody for the hard work that they put in this year. And I let everyone know I've enjoyed working with them and enjoyed the success that we have all worked hard for in our community. So thank you.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Mr. Lando.
I just want to make sure everybody knows that we have serious interest on the Gateway project, and we're working to move that forward. It'll be a long time coming, but I want to make sure people know there is a project that is being looked at on that property.
Thank you. Mrs. Nevers.
I just wanted to provide a very brief update on the status of the municipal auditorium. Currently, the repairs are still underway. The plans have been completed, so we can put those out for requests for proposal for the restroom remodel and accessibility updates. Also, the roof is near completion, but with that comes the exterior of the building and more dry rot and issues being uncovered as it's being repaired. So we have asked the construction company to assess the building one more time, give us their best and final as to what the repairs would look like to get that building up to a current leak-proof status that will ensure its longevity for the future. So we'll bring that back at a future date. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Deal. On purpose this time?
2 days in. Yeah.
Great.
Wow.
I'd like to comment on that too. I drove by last night with all the fires going. It looked pretty cool. But it's nice to see that moving forward. You know, I grew up within a block of that orchard my whole life, and it used to be something, you know, but now it's turned into something. So it's something different.
Yeah.
It's something.
Yeah.
But people I don't think people realize that with response to our first responders to the problems that have been happening in that orchard, the costs have been to the city well over $100,000 a year. So happy to see the owner moving forward with this project so we can not only bring housing to our community, but mitigate a problem that there's a lot of deaths have happened in that orchard, a lot of overdoses, a lot of sexual assaults, a lot of things that that won't happen there anymore. Mrs. Duncan.
I too would like to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and let everybody know how much I appreciate it.
Oh.
Thank you. Merry Christmas. Councilmember Pittman wish to speak.
Yeah, I've got to throw a compliment out to our police and fire department. Happened to go to a bank here in town recently, and an individual had went into the bank and stolen the food from the Salvation Army donation barrel, and is a very difficult individual. Every community has these particular problems, and I know our chief is working hard on a program or a potential solution coming up, and I look forward to that. But this individual was, I got to compliment the officers on their patience. It was not something I would have had for that situation. So kudos to your members.
Yes, there's a reason for the phrase "termed out," and our patience grows small.
That's true, very true. But
Mr. Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I'll second Ms. Duncan's comments about I wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I very much appreciate working with you in this time of year.
Thank you. Merry Christmas, sir. All right. Well, with that, we will adjourn till January 5th, 2021 at 8 p.m. Meeting's adjourned.